directors. I'd like to give a special welcome to our new superintendent, Sheila. Sheila has hit the ground running July 1st. She's been busy, and we're very happy to have you here, so thank you. Yes? Oh, yeah, well, why don't you do that?
Oh, hello.
Hi.
Congratulations.
Thank you. All right. So I'm looking for a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved. Second.
Anyone have any changes or additions, deletions on the agenda? All right, so all in favor of accepting the agenda as written, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Excellent. All right, that brings us to public communication. Yes, Nancy?
Nancy Ambrose. I'm a teacher at the high school, and I'm also a taxpayer in Virginia. And my 3 children graduated from this area. I would ask that if you have executive session, you come back to the open meeting. I know it says you did in here, but it kind of fizzled out last month, last June. So I wasn't sure when you were done.
I think it was kind of long, actually, so maybe.
I left because people left.
We did go back out and everyone was gone. Yeah.
It was
people were gone.
I don't know, maybe
But
I wasn't. Anyway,
well
just
taken.
if you do.
Yes.
And the other issue was we just got an email that we can't get into our classrooms until the day of in-service. And so I've spoken to several people who are a little stressed about having their classroom prepared for the first day of school. I know we're allowed the Thursday afternoon, and I believe Tuesday afternoon is usually the contracted time. I would just put a plead in for if there's any possible extra time, that would be greatly appreciated by people not feeling the stress of trying to get that done and in such a short time.
I would comment you're talking to the wrong people. Sheila's the one you gotta talk to.
Yeah, but this is the only way I can really get that information. I guess I could have emailed her, but I was coming tonight, so I thought I would just mention it.
Thank you. Hopefully the work on the school will make everything worthwhile in the long run. Thank you. Any other public comment tonight? So we have a presentation to the board that Sheila has done to review some of our policies and go over roles and responsibilities as we head into the new school year. So do you want to go ahead and take it out? Okay.
Schedule to review these policies at this meeting for some time. So Sue asked if I would review them, and it was good because it gave me an opportunity to look at these particular policies in more depth. So really just in thinking about the role of the board, the boards are accountable to voters and are subject to the laws, rules, and regulations of the state. That's pretty much the role of the board. And then you have a number of policies that guide your work in that regard. So we're going to review the policies A1, A20, A21, A23, A30, and F30. No, yep. Nope. So the first policy is about board member conflict of interest. That's policy A1. And the policy states that it's the ethical and legal duty of all school board members to avoid conflicts of interest as well as the appearance of conflicts of interest. And that's defined as a situation where a board member's private interest, as distinguished from the board's interest as a member of the general public, would benefit from or be harmed by his or her actions as a board member. So if you can click, these are your implementation steps in the policy. There are parameters around following the law around the bidding process. It's interesting that the majority of these talk about the impression, not necessarily that you have to do these things, but rather that you might be giving the impression. So for example, the second one says, will not give the impression that he, she would represent special interests or partisan politics for personal gain. Will not give the impression that he, she has the authority to make decisions or take action on behalf of the board or administration. Will not use his or her position to promote personal financial interest or those of family or friends. Will not accept money or anything of value in return for taking a certain position, and will not give the impression that his or her position on any issue can be influenced by anything other than a fair presentation of all sides of a question. So I don't know if you have comments or questions about this particular policy.
I actually do have a question. I know that George's daughter works for the district, and my daughter-in-law is about to sign a contract for the district, and I'm just curious what we need to be aware of in terms of that, like in terms of negotiations, because George is on the negotiations committee, or in terms of approving contracts or whatever.
In this particular case, his daughter is not covered under the bargaining agreement,
Right.
so when he's negotiating a contract, it's not to the benefit of his daughter. On the other hand, your situation might be different, so you would probably need to recuse yourself from anything related to negotiations or contract development or approval, because it's a perceived.
For the whole, not just approval of her
Yes,
being
because
hired.
in my past experience, that would be a perceived conflict of interest. It isn't, you know, to suggest that you wouldn't be acting, you know, professionally and objectively and so forth, but it's that perceived conflict of interest if you were to represent the board in that way.
Okay,
Do
thanks.
others agree with that interpretation?
So when we go to approve the contract or have discussions around it, that
I
Diana
just
would
don't
just recuse?
participate at
You
all.
would, yeah, you would
Recuse.
recuse yourself.
You have to abstain then? She'll have
Mhm.
to abstain.
Yep. Thank you. That's a great question.
It's fine.
Have lunch.
Any-
Other situations or examples you want to bring up?
Value return.
I think we'll come back to this one for number 3. When we're talking about interacting with the public, that impression that you have the authority to make decisions or take action on behalf of the board sort of comes up a little bit later, so we can come back to this. The next one is about agenda prep and distribution, and all I brought forward here was Nicole Mace's slides from last year, because she came and did this very same training with you, so I just borrowed her slides, because this is really around you holding meetings in compliance with Vermont's open meeting law. So if, Beth, those are the statutes that pertain to the open meeting law right there, and Beth, if you could just click on the content of the slide, it'll take you to a separate presentation. There you go. So again, these were Nicole's slides from last year, and this is just talking about what the law says. All meetings of a public body are declared to be open at all times. So you can't take action except in the open meeting forum. And then it defines public body and meeting and so forth. The bottom bullet, the very last one, talks about a little bit about electronic communication. We're gonna come back to that one. A meeting is not, if you're emailing back and forth about the content of an agenda, that's fine. You just can't be you can't be in decision-making mode or discussion mode. You can simply be discussing just the body of the agenda itself if there's a reply all email chain going around. So questions just about the definition or what constitutes an open meeting here before we go on? You guys remember this from last year? Yeah, okay.
I think Nicole gave an update, and I'm not sure where it ended up falling, but there was another ruling that perhaps even an email chain or a phone chain could be considered a meeting as well.
Mm-hmm.
If the
It
same
depends what you're discussing. Again, if you're
conversation-
just like, are we gonna
Right.
put this on this
Right.
August 13th or the August
But
20th. I'm not
around.
sure. Let's check with this person. So, I mean, it's just basically you can't decide or discuss anything unless that you're in this room. So, that's really the
Within, amongst the quorum of
Right.
the group.
right.
Right.
And best practice would suggest really that, you do save it for the board meeting.
So, discussion, and it's a really murky one around.
Yeah, this one's
for all of us,
tricky.
I think.
Mhm.
So if I wanted to, let's say there was something on the agenda and I wanted to express an opinion, and I shot an email off to the entire board. No one responds to me, that's not a discussion, or is it?
So are you saying that your comment is about what you believe will be decided or discussed? Like, oh, I see this is coming up, I just want you to know this is my opinion on the matter and how I intend to.
Essentially, yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Like it
I mean, I would personally say that belongs in the boardroom, not really, I'm not sure the benefit of sharing that in advance of the meeting, and then those in the audience and others don't benefit from hearing that. They're not coming to the meeting with the same background, right? All the members of the public and so forth don't know that that's the position that you're representing coming in, whereas the people that you've emailed do, I think it's best practice would be to not even give the impression that you're willing to have that dialogue, because you don't know in advance, right, of sending that out that no one's gonna reply either. I don't know, Again, I don't know if others would interpret it the same way, but to me, that's the beginning of a discussion. If you're putting something out there as consideration or food for thought about the content of an agenda, I would say that belongs in the meeting. Wish Nicole was here. It's awkward as the incoming superintendent to be like starting. This is an awkward starting spot with y'all. So I can only go by my interpretation and my past experience and what your policies say, not really having the benefit of understanding where you've come as a board. But I would say that this is not a spot you want to misstep. If your role is to build trust with the public, which I know it is. I know you're very concerned and want to do the best you can by the members of the public. Then to me, I think this is one you want to be really careful with. If transparency and openness is something that we strive for, then I really think this one's tricky.
So the only information we get is what's been disseminated to us. That's the only information we bring to the board meeting. So then we should be able to expect, if we have any questions related to whatever, that all those should be answered here. Is that a correct statement too?
I think so.
Sue, you see what I'm saying? I mean, like,
Questions about
whatever,
action items?
whatever.
I would
We're
think
talking about policy, we're talking about, a procedure, whatever. I'm not being specific. It isn't always my impression that the board meetings allow for a lot of discussion. That's my sensation. And so that's my whole thing with all this, but it's public meeting law, it's public meeting law. It's really hard in a 2-hour meeting to get all the information you need and then actually act on it. But I guess it's the way it is.
I would think with some, they're warned before you're acting, right? Like in the case of a policy, you wouldn't be asked to adopt it at the same meeting it was first discussed, right?
Right.
So that would be, I would think, an exception to that.
We're gonna be acting on teacher contracts that are being offered, and who knows? I'm not saying there's a question about it. What I'm saying is, there really isn't any place but this to question.
Except that under the previous administration, the desire was that if we had questions from what we saw in the agenda and the attachments, that we would forward those questions ahead of time so that administration could be prepared to give us answers during the meeting, which would
Right.
allow them time to research something.
forward the questions to the superintendent, not to the rest of the
No,
board.
right, yeah.
Right.
That's
But those
different.
answers shouldn't come to us personally. Those answers should be only at the board level, right? I mean, if we can ask a question,
Yeah,
Right.
and so that whoever is doing the presentation has the opportunity to get the information they need. But we shouldn't get those answers
no,
from the
it-
superintendent. That should all be done at the board level.
The superintendent or the business manager or whoever should bring it to the board meeting.
Right.
But you can ask a question before the meeting.
It's just the whole board wouldn't be privy to the question until we actually met, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Is that how you would envision that
Yeah,
working? And
I
then
think
you would say-
absolutely, and I think,
I-
again, it kind of goes back to the other policy about, public comment and so forth too, which circles back around, just, you know, and we'll come to that, but I would say absolutely, you could forward your question to me, you could also forward a question to Sue, so that it could be asked. It's just the reply all email threads, that look like a discussion. I think that's what this is about.
Does that help?
All right, can we?
I think it's gonna be a long time before I get this, so, anyway, but thank you.
Yes.
Go over it.
So this is public comment. So board meetings are public meetings, but they're not a meeting of the public. So you always want to leave space for people to comment, and it is, the board chair can implement reasonable rules about public comment at the point that's necessary. It doesn't look like from the board meetings I've reviewed that this is an issue, but if for some reason you had a long line of, you know, many people that wanted to speak, there might be some time constraints placed on each person. They might have to sign up on a sign-in sheet, their name, and, you know, you might do that in just some sort of organized way, but people can come and express their views on any matter, whether it's something coming up on the agenda or not, and that's what this is about, the public comment period. Can we go on?
Can I ask a question about that?
Yes?
So I feel like it's come up in the past that people in the audience are anticipating something we're gonna be discussing or making a decision on.
Yep.
But the public comment has passed,
Mm-hmm.
and they wanna be able to maybe speak again once they hear our conversation or decision. So is there a way for us to formally allow for that, or just take it case by case, which
But
is
then-
what we've been doing, I
Then
think.
what you're doing is you're taking it from a meeting held in public and making it a public meeting.
I guess so. That's one way to look at it, yes. But it also doesn't afford our public a chance to voice their concerns or opinions.
They can come back at another meeting, and the fact that the meetings are now back to back too kind of helps
That's
with
true.
that. So,
Anyway, just
yeah.
food
I
for
mean,
thought.
technically speaking, that's true.
They only
That
only
portion of
one.
the meeting has passed, and your board meeting has continued on, and that's your topic, so. Rules,
I'd just like to follow up on what Christina said. The board meetings are difficult, and I would like to see, I understand what George's issue is, but I also want it to be friendly to our public, right? So I support what she's asking about. I'm not asking there should be any change, but just wanted to say that. Thank you.
rules about how and when you can go into executive session. You have to first meet in open session and vote to go into the executive session for the purpose that you specify, and there's a list of the things you can go into executive session for. You can decide who comes into the executive session with you, and you can't make a decision in executive session. You have to come out of the executive session, take a motion and vote in open session. And this I'm gonna skip over because it's about contract negotiations in open session, and that has since changed since Nicole did this presentation. So if someone wants to allege that you've done something inappropriate with these things, there is a process that they need to follow. They need to allege the specific violation, like you violated the open meeting law, and tell you when and why and how. And there are, basically parameters to follow. I don't know if you've ever found yourself in this situation, but
We have.
Yes.
We have, and as well in my old district, and, you know, there's usually steps you can take to acknowledge the misstep and correct it as needed. Sometimes that involves even more training, you know, if that's needed. Someone wants to allege that you violated an open meeting law, you know, practice. We could elect to have even more training about when you can and can't, or what's considered open meeting or not, or, you know, if you've gone into executive session illegally or something to that effect, we can opt for more training in and around that as a corrective action.
I said we have. I don't know that we've gotten to an actual formal, I mean, we've had emails that have questioned things, but I think they've been addressed by the administration, so I don't know that we've gotten to it through a formal.
My past practice has suggested it's usually just a misstep. We just,
Right.
you know, it's usually not something that's intentional. When boards misstep in this regard, it's just something that they've done out of order, so. So part of that could involve a public records request. If there was a violation, they could request, for example, those email threads that we were just discussing, which is one of the reasons why you don't really want to put stuff in email in that way, because that would then give truth to this kind of behavior. Can we go on?
Sorry, let's go back. So a public record is anything which is produced or acquired in the course of public agency's business. So anything except, I would expect, payroll.
Yeah, can we go on to the next slide?
So,
There's
okay.
the
So anything that's produced, we could ask about curriculum, public, anything. Okay, I didn't realize.
Not this isn't us, though, this is public. Anyone who's
Well,
a
but if
member
I
of the
came as a public
Right,
person,
right, but us, including us, but.
Unless
No,
it
right.
deals with privileged or confidential information like personnel records. Test questions is included on here. You can't say, show us the test on the final exam that, you know, those kids didn't do well on or whatever. Collective bargaining documents and student records, those are all confidential. And if we got this far in this process, I wouldn't be the person speaking to this. This would be our attorney. So, you know, you can deny a public records request, but I wouldn't navigate my way through this without help from our attorney, because you know, there are specific, like everything else, there are specific you know, protocols to follow with this.
One clarification there too around public records is it refers to anything that is produced. So it already has to be in the format that the district isn't required to recreate or take information or download information and put it into some particular format that's being requested. Correct? It's if the document exists.
To recreate something, no.
Right.
It should be something that exists, but that could be email, which
Right,
then has
right.
to be redacted oftentimes. And in that case, it does take a lot of time to do that if you have to redact, you know, because it's somebody's confidential information in there, student name, whatever it might be. Parents might email, say, for example, the superintendent for a variety of reasons, not imagining that a public records request would ever come about. And so to protect what that person may or may not have included in their email, that would have to be redacted, which can take a lot of time. But hopefully we will not find ourselves in that situation for any reason. So there are some electronic communication guidelines. Kind of goes back to what we already said. Don't text, email, blog, tweet, or post anything you wouldn't want to see on the front page of the newspaper. That's Nicole's thing, and I think that's true. I think that's just best practice. Assume somebody might read your email at some point in the future and think about how, you know, and what you're saying in that fact. Don't discuss executive session in email or anything else that would be protected. This is for all of you to make sure that you're not participating in an online discussion about board business in email or electronic form or otherwise, and understand how the conflicts of interest policies apply to electronic communications as well. There's a case in here about Front Porch Forum that kind of speaks to that, going back to the number 3 of when number 3 of the board member conflict of interest, where it says, a board member will not give the impression that she has the authority to make decisions or take action on behalf of the board or the school administration. I think Front Porch Forum, Facebook, and other places kind of invite that inappropriate board response at times, and Nicole had put in a couple of cases, but something breaks out, on the wall or something of Facebook or in Front Porch Forum, and you see it and you think, oh, that's half information or not quite accurate, and you just want to weigh in and correct it. And in that case, it's so hard because you really aren't, you yourself personally can't really decide on behalf of the board that you want to weigh in and respond to that thing on Facebook. So it's black and white, and then there's shades of gray. It's really hard to implement this. You're walking down the aisle of the grocery store and somebody comes up to you and says, oh, I have to talk to you. It's so hard just to not respond, especially if they have misinformation. You just want to sort of sway them in one way or another to think differently about what they're communicating to you. So that one, this particular Front Porch case study was about someone spreading some information on Front Porch Forum that wasn't true. If you go to the next slide, someone weighs in and says, wow, I'm a board member in this school, and we're so good at keeping secrets. They even kept the secret from me. So they're being really sarcastic in this email and saying, how did I not know this was happening on my very own board? And then if you scroll down on a different day, the person responds back and they're starting to talk about public record, and before you know it, this exchange has turned sort of unprofessional and violated a lot of agreements and tenets of these policies that we're talking about here. So on the last slide, Nicole just says, you really shouldn't weigh in on discussions on Front Porch Forum related to board business. The board spokesperson, chair, administrator may use Front Porch Forum to share official statements that have been approved by all of you. You probably have done that in the past and around your budget or bond or other things where you decide, like, let's post this, let's put this out there. This is a great way to share information. Front Porch Forum is phenomenal for that, but not a place to have a public dialogue about something you're discussing as a board. Even if it seems like a small correction or something that you want to make, it can be a slippery slope. So you can use it for the nuts and bolts stuff and other things, but there's Nicole's conflict and contact information. So questions, comments about public comment and open meeting law? We're going to discuss, I think, later on Front Porch Forum and ideas we might have for maximizing that as a communication tool. So it isn't to say it shouldn't be used, it's just how. Okay, so next slide. That was the public participation, which is A21, and that's basically covered in Nicole's presentation that we just did. Who can address the board, who can public comment, so forth. Then you have a policy on community engagement and vision. It basically just says you're going to seek to engage with the community to make sure that what you're doing here as a board represents what they value and want to have happen. So, and that you're going to take steps to make sure that when you engage with the public, you're trying to solicit a broad representative representation of the community itself, so that you're taking steps to get out, different kinds of folks that might not come just to a meeting like this, and that you'll use what you learn to interact with or make decisions as a board going forward. And then policy. You guys are all over this. These policies are in great shape. Basically says that you have a role to adopt policy in accordance with what's recommended, what's required, and so forth, and that The policies will be administered through procedures and directives of the superintendent and members of the admin team. So you'll help create the policies and we'll carry them out, is essentially what this says. And that's your role as a board. And you've done a nice job strategically placing those reports throughout the year. It seems most of them now have a place to report back on. And then last, your role is in and around budgeting. So after public hearings and other informational meetings, you'll bring forward a budget for adoption by the voting public. And that will happen at the annual meeting and so forth. And that's that.
Great. Thank you. Are there any more questions about any of those policies or anything else that Sheila brought up? All right, good. Well, that's a good review. Going into a new school year, so thank you, Sheila, for doing that. All right, that brings us up to our action items. So, someone like to make a motion?
I'll move that we approve the minutes from June 11.
Second.
Okay. Any conversation on the minutes? Yes, Lori.
So at the meeting, I was confused about which number we're supposed to be approving for the finance loans. And in particular around the payroll number. And that is not the correct number. That was not the total.
So you're referring to 874, 937?
937.58. It was a million something. So we've now figured out what was going on. There's two reports that we were given. One has the total and one has a part of it.
I remember that, yeah.
Right? So I just wanted to make that clear. We will be using the correct number. I'm not quite sure what the board's pleasure is about correcting this or not correcting this.
So was the motion made for the incorrect number? Did we actually
That is
approve
correct.
the incorrect number?
Yes, we did.
So can we approve the remaining amount next week?
Next time? Okay.
That way, everything will be
Copacetic.
approved. Does that make sense?
I think it does.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
So we don't need to
Approve too
change.
much.
We don't want to approve
Correct.
too much.
Okay.
That's
Right.
correct.
No, I just
The
mean
smaller
last
number and.
Right. That's
Got
the
it.
better error to have made.
I agree completely.
Okay.
Thank you.
So in terms of the minutes, then, they are
all
accurate as
set.
to what
That
happened?
is correct.
Okay,
But I want, yeah, right.
okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Anything else about the minutes? All right. All in favor of accepting or approving the minutes of June 11th, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. And we have 3 contracts to authorize.
Do we move it first?
Sure.
So I move that we authorize the superintendent to offer a contract to the nurse for point 2, special educator, and an elementary teacher.
I'll second that.
Okay. So Sheila did put information about each of these people and position in her report. Questions? George?
Is this point 2 in addition to a full-time that we have?
No, the high school nurse reduced to a .8, so this is the additional .2 to cover the full-time position.
Oh, we're keeping a full-time position, it's just split between 2 people now. Okay, thank you.
Anything else on these contracts before we vote? Okay, all in favor of authorizing the superintendent to offer these 3 contracts, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. Excellent. That brings us to the superintendent's report and building and grounds report. So Sheila, did you have anything that you wanted to highlight or add from your report here?
Well,
Oh, you
I
do
just
have
wanted to acknowledge too that you've been very helpful to me in my first 6 weeks, and I really appreciate it. Sue has spent a lot of time with me, and it's very evident that she's committed to this being a very successful relationship for all of us. So I really appreciate the extra time and effort, and pretty much, you know, just been meeting with as many people as possible and trying to figure out, you know, sort of what you've got in the works and what our work and priorities will be in meeting with the administrative team for 3 days this week. I think we had a pretty successful kickoff, and it felt very positive. And I did reframe the leadership structure just a little bit to help us focus more so on issues of education and issues of operations management and finance and so forth. So we kind of made some distinctions between those two groups and divvied up the folks that will attend on the different days so we can better prioritize and focus in those areas. So I'd say those are the main things that I would choose to highlight, and I'll be bringing back more information about those two teams and some of our work when I talk more about my board goals on October 8th.
We're going to talk about Ken's
I'm
assistant.
going to let Ken do that when
Oh.
Ken talks.
Okay.
So did you want to talk about your goals now at this point?
Is that,
The-
does
the
that make sense?
Preliminary goals,
Sure.
yes.
Yeah.
I think that makes sense.
Yep.
And I also just wanted to say, I hope everyone has had a chance to meet with Sheila, and if not, I think the invitation still stands. yes?
Absolutely.
Just contact her.
No, if you haven't talked to her by now,
It's probably an
It might get
ongoing
harder
invitation.
to fit in a time
Right.
that works well, but.
So can we ask questions about Sheila's report at some
Yes,
point?
yes. Do you have questions about other items on here?
I do have
Before we
one
move.
question.
Yes.
I was just wondering about clarification on the principal's report section. Just to understand what the report is going to be like, and I noticed that it said that they not necessarily would be sharing what's happening at individual schools, which for me was like, well, wait a minute, that's like the best part of the report, because we find out what's going on at the schools. So, anyway,
Well, would you guys like to?
Was
speak to
that,
So,
I read that as meaning that they would do these presentations versus the school-based presentation when we go to the schools,
okay, rather than
rather
the
than
regular
on the
reports we usually
but
get.
That was the way I read it.
Reports were staying the same, it was a presentation you're looking at as a district
Okay.
versus.
That's what I wanted
the
clarification about.
presentations were very schools focused before, and they're looking for areas of commonality
Okay.
where we can speak to a topic rather than to something
Got
that's
it.
happening
So
just
the
at a
monthly
school.
reports will be
So
pretty
the
much the same.
reports, the only question about the reports is, I think it's every other time versus every time, because now you've added these second meetings. So
Right.
trying to bring some clarity around, are we gonna focus more on operations and fiscal management at one and
Right.
more ed leadership at another, sort of like we're doing at the admin team level? That's still just a little bit fuzzy to me, just in terms of your regular agenda items and so forth. So, that said, we weren't ready to deliver a principal's report for
That's
this
fine.
meeting, so we
Okay.
just sort of put that one on pause.
Great, thank you.
Lori?
I love our responsive classroom and our PBIS. I love it, but I have heard about it lots, it seems. And unless there's something new going on, I'm not sure why we should dedicate another meeting to it. Couldn't we, I mean, like, I haven't heard much about proficiency-based learning, like all the seniors did their
So that's
portfolio this year.
also here.
I realize that, but it's in May,
Right.
right? And why couldn't we, I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just saying, we've heard a lot about responsive classroom. I love the program. I think it's really, really important. But we just had a presentation, I think last May, and I know it's January. I'm just saying, there's lots of other things we could be doing.
We didn't do anything on responsive classroom because it's a brand new training that we've just been doing.
So
Just
I'm
rolling
not
out this year.
understanding something. Lynn, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think that the,
RCC isn't responsive classroom, am I?
RRC.
RRC, thank you very much.
No, that's.
Completely different.
totally different.
Well, pardon me. Forgive me for stepping out. I got it. Thank you very much.
Sure.
This is RC, that's RRC.
Yes, yes.
Presentation and you will.
Know exactly what it is.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's not at the high school, right? Responsive classroom.
We'll find out in January. Any other questions about the remainder of Sheila's report here? Okay. So, what was just handed around that Sheila is going to talk about are some sort of an entry plan for Sheila, some goals for the first 3 to 4 months, so that we can then, as a board, look through these, do a little formative evaluation in October, and then at that point, after we've had our retreat and she's gotten to know the district a little bit, she will form some goals for the remainder of the school year that are aligned to our strategic plan. Does that make sense? All right.
So in terms of how I structured this, I just took the headings from my job description and tried to establish, I thought that was a good organizational structure for the goals, just to make sure that I'm being really well-rounded and so forth. So, and then in working a little bit with Sue, just identified sort of, you know, what these, as she said, entry-level beginning goals would be. So I'm not going to read them all, but, you know, basically it's about getting to know people, and it's about setting up systems and structures, and you know, learning the policies and budgets, and got a big bond underway. So it's really a lot of learning and a lot of connecting with people, and just trying to, you know, not making a lot of sweeping change, nor will I necessarily need to. So that's basically what my goals are about for now. And then we have the retreat coming up, so that particular cell is blank. So if you look under board and superintendent relationships, I don't really have any strategies other than we're planning the retreat. We're working with Mike DeWeese tomorrow, as a matter of fact, to plan our agenda for that. So that'll be a big chunk of work in the next month, is getting prepared for that retreat and making sure that we're super successful with that effort. Couple of the practices that under management that I would say I would kind of tick off as being a success sort of right out of the gate coming in. I was asking a lot of questions about what's your practice for this, or what's your policy for that. Not policy so much, but sort of procedure or practice around some of the administrative tasks in the district, like professional development or asking for a day off, or, you know, all of those kinds of procedures. So I worked with Glory to pull together all of those practices into one binder that we're calling the admin guidebook. And then we shared that back with the admin to say, is this the most current version of this? Because there seems to be multiple iterations of many of these things, and I just kind of confirmed with them that, in fact, that was the case. And we'll be working on this a little bit more, but it's just a nice collection, and it's a good go-to to be able to give to someone like Kathleen or myself to say, here's how we do things here. So that's, I'll share that with you as evidence of my work when we come back and revisit this. Cool. And we've got a big focus right now on school safety and our school safety protocols. So I've been working with Ken and Glory, who have been working weekly on this topic. Ken with sort of the, I don't want to steal your thunder, but just sort of the protocols, and Glory more so with like the documentation of those protocols, so that we can communicate with staff and be really, really clear with all of those pieces. So these two have been the dynamic duo getting all that ready to go, and I'm really impressed with the work that they've done.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
I have a question. I didn't know we had a district safety team.
We do.
You do now. You do now.
Okay.
You're looking at
Think they are, they're right there.
Well, let's make it crystal clear to the public that we have a school district safety team, who's on it and what they do.
Sure.
I mean,
That's part of the protocols and the whole guide that we're updating. So we have an existing guide, so we're really just augmenting that existing guide in alignment with current best practice.
okay. So how will you let the public know that we have a district safety team?
They can watch the TV.
We,
On the,
We'll be
I'm
getting
kind of
some-
encouraging you to do something on
Yeah.
the web or something like
Yeah.
that, and let's, more talk in the public about school safety, the better.
Yep, agreed.
It's still kind of formulating though, right?
It
That's my
is.
understanding,
Yeah,
like,
we
there's
just had the
still gonna be new
retreat
people
Last week.
joining it, right,
Yeah.
because we had the facilities meeting last Friday and we learned about this new team.
But essentially, there's a district level team, and then there's school-based teams, and there's interface between those teams, and then there's interface between the district team and, you know, the first responders, the community partners that we have, so that we're all on the same page with all of this.
Perfect. Yes, Lauren?
Just, when you say first responders, does that mean the chief of police?
Mhm.
Okay,
Among other people.
among the first responders,
Yeah.
yeah, okay, thank you.
Other questions about these preliminary goals? All right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right, so if there's nothing else for Sheila, I guess that brings us to Ken's update report.
I'm up.
All right.
So I guess I can start off with the fact that last year, you guys approved an assistant for me at the high school to take over supervising some of the duties at the high school. Well, we have hired that person. So they started last week, or August 6th, I believe it was. It's been a relief to have someone to delegate some of those issues off to. He's certainly paying for himself right now in a wide variety of ways. One example is the freezer here went down this week, of all weeks. That's when it usually goes down. And he was here, he came, he fixed it, no cost. So I foresee a lot of that between him and I being able to save our district in that way, which means we would be paying less for services and able to use that money to reinvest in infrastructure, so that in new stuff rather than mending old things. That is my goal, always has been. So thank you guys for pushing that along last year when I was requesting it. Plus, it's helped because this has been a stressful process this past year, just learning everything, all the changes, and now we're about to do it again. Just like Sheila said, we're working on systems. We're about to start with, new security system at all the schools, cameras, door monitoring, all that kind of stuff. So integrating all of that technology is what we're working on. And Gloria and I have been working very closely on the safety and the teams and how everything is going to integrate, how we're going to meet throughout the year with the different teams. So that's what we've been doing, is working on getting a system for all of that. With that said, as far as the bond goes, we are on budget and on time with the bond.
Could you say it again?
Well, I didn't say, I said we are on budget and on time with one exception.
Okay.
And that exception is the 1958 chimney at the high school. So after really close inspection, as we got going into the project, it was determined that the chimney had to come down. And this was the time to do it. There's a lot of reasons why we chose to do that. And some of it was that there was a new roof going underneath it, and the old chimney was crumbling at the top, and we were seeing a lot of evidence of the concrete and the brick and the mortar on the roof, which is a rubber flat roof. So we chose to have EEI while they were there with our building permit, with all of the people and their connections to do it. And so that is a big deal, because we will not have to worry about that for, 60 years. This is a 60-year project, much like most of what we're doing is ranging between 25 and 60 years. So I think that's one thing I want to kind of stress, is that the stuff that we're doing is 25 to 60 years, most of it. And so everybody should be pretty happy about those kind of infrastructure changes. Virgin's elementary kitchen. As we got going into that, there was a range hood that was included into the scope of the project, which was a code issue. And as we started to fit that thing in just in drawings, I realized how bad the kitchen was designed, along with the food service director, and just looking at the plumbing that was totally illegal, not up to code, all those kinds of things. The arrangement of everything. So we decided to take money from last year's budget as we closed out the year from Virgin's Elementary, squeeze everything I could out of that 2,600, put it into this extra for this project, and As it stands right now, we could probably do some of that with this year's budget, but it's very likely that we come to the board for some capital improvement money for the new stove that we've put in there, a serving line, and a couple of other things. So when I say we renovated the kitchen, I mean we did another 50-year change out here. This is not something with the Virgins Elementary School running 365 days a year, as Matthew knows. It's really impossible to shut that down. So I saw that as a huge opportunity while this was being shut down all year, and we just went for the Augusto, so to speak, and it's all gonna be really nice. It will be the nicest kitchen in the district, right behind the high school. So that's well on its way. Should be up and running by the middle of next week.
Ken?
Yeah.
Can I give you a little anecdote? I was on the school board when that kitchen was being built, and there were questions about the design of it then.
Yeah.
And apparently, the ladies who were cooking in the kitchen wanted it that way with all those little rooms.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting to hear
It
you
is
say
interesting.
this.
And so, you know, I took Kathy Alexander, who's the director of food service, and I took the engineer, and I took everybody, fire marshal, everyone. You know, we all got together on the table, and we were like, okay, and that's how we decided what we were going to do. And a lot of it was before we started the project. So this had to happen really fast, and could we do it? And, you know, the grease trap that was in there was rusted. Turns out, when we took it out, it was rusted through, meaning it was leaking into under the foundation of the kitchen, into the gravel of the school. I have some great photos of that stuff. And so we removed it and put it outside and where it should be, and it's a poly tank. And so another 40-year, 50-year thing that we did there. So that's really good. So moving on real quick, because I'm probably running out of time. Summer work, just for our district and for all of the crews around here. You know, we have removed the pre-K building at the elementary school in Virgins. That's a big deal. How many years was that there? 30-something at a lot per month, per year for 25 or 30 years. So that's gone. It's a nice big parking lot now out there, which we're going to add some green space to. Playgrounds have been upgraded. We did our best with what we could here and in Addison. We made 10 teacher moves throughout the district. Library, math labs moved in Addison, lots of different rooms moving around, teachers moving. That's been really challenging with all of the work that we've had going on top of, you know, regular summer's work. We've taken burning bushes out at the high school on the circle. We've installed 25 whiteboards, moved 6 smart boards, installed 4 smart boards, things like that. New hot water in the Virgins High School from only a 4-year-old hot water making machine that has cost the district a lot since it was installed 4 years ago. So I've redesigned that, and that should be a problem no longer. I would say that that's pretty much the summer at this point.
Well, that
like to
sounds like
try to
a bit.
I'm gonna, yeah, I'll probably stop right there if there's any questions.
Thank you.
Can answer a few.
Questions for Ken? They've been busy. Yes,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Thanks a lot. It's
Thanks.
really, it's pretty awesome to have an expert at all our buildings. It really is. It's super awesome, and I don't know the half of it, I'm sure. And I wondered if the board is gonna hear what the cost overages are. Is
Yeah,
that
I mean,
gonna
I
be in the
can
future?
speak to some of that. So we're probably looking at, and I'm still waiting on some of the final numbers to come in. I've asked for them, should be receiving them within a week or so. But we're probably looking at between $30,000 and $40,000 for the lowering or removal of the 35-foot of chimney at the high school. And then there may be some fire code violations that were pre-existing. And so when they open all these ceilings up this year, and every Thursday the state fire marshal's touring our buildings, they're like, what about that? And, you know, what about that? And of course, EEI is like, well, that's not in the scope. That was done back then. And so they've asked for them to be fixed. and caught up. And so along that process right now, we have kind of a ballpark number, but it may be $5,000, you know, or so, maybe 10. But so my estimation right now is $40,000 for the chimney and the fire caulking stuff. And if I was to come to the board after Elizabeth and I sit down as we get into the year a little bit and look at our budget for that kitchen stuff at the Virgins Elementary School, and we might be looking at another 15,000. So those are the numbers that I've come up with. So you could be looking at a total of 55,000 worth of real capital improvement stuff.
But that all falls within the contingency for the bond.
No,
It doesn't.
no. The stuff that has been contingent to the bond has been, the contingency funds, most of it has been absorbed with stuff like the finding of asbestos at the high school. There's been lots of stuff that that has taken up that. EEI has really done a good job, though, at helping and doing stuff outside of the scope that it just made sense to do. And so we've been watching that closely, but I need, and they need, a little more time for this to finish, to really see what the numbers come in at.
But we really don't have any choice. When the fire marshal sees something and we're doing a project of this size, the rule of law is that you have to bring it up to code.
And I think the biggest factor here is that the chimney was one of those things, like, you just don't walk away with that, right? And and George saw it firsthand, because I asked very nicely, right, George, to
Yes.
come up onto the roof at the high school.
Yep, we
So-
saw it, there's no question.
Yeah, and so other than that, it's like the fire stuff, so.
Ken, can you just speak to the parts or pieces of the project that will probably finish during school breaks down the road?
Yeah, that is a good point.
Yeah.
So, right now, the project is not coming to an end. The project contract goes all the way to June 30th or whatever it is this year. So the way it's been strategized is to get all of the certificate of occupancy work done so that all 4 of our schools can open. And to put it in layman's terms, it just means that we've done everything that we had to in the hallways and everything we had to in these places, and kind of got out of the building and into the holes and the places that you don't ever see. And then the boilers and so on and that kind of stuff are in and installed, but they haven't been, final connections haven't been made, commissioning, turning on, that kind of stuff. But we have no doubt that all that stuff will be done before it gets cold, and we need it. So I would say that, you know, we've worked, strategized to get ourselves out. Same goes for solar panels and the roofing. Solar panels and roofing are on schedule, you know, right now, providing that we don't get any crazy rain. Had a really dry summer, and then right at the end we start getting rain, but that's happening as we speak. The new roofing and the solar panels are, if you go around the school right now and see, you'll see piles and piles of stuff, and that's what you're looking at, is roofing and solar.
And did I hear you say that will be done before schools?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they are pushing. They have like 60 people working the roof to get this done for the 29th of August.
Wow.
And whatever happens here, it will be to a point where they may pull out of there if they have to, with some of the stuff that's around the building so school can start, but most of the heavy infrastructure will be done.
It's all good news.
Do we
Yeah,
have
it
a
is.
contingency plan if something goes wrong in terms of the start of school?
It's not going to.
We don't need one.
That's your plan.
Yeah.
It's not going to.
So I just have one last question related to Nancy's concerns for the teachers getting into the building. A, is there any chance that they're going to be able to get in there earlier? And B, do all the elementary schools have access earlier to get in, or?
So not everyone's impacted equally by this.
Yep.
So some schools, yes, and other schools, no. But the problem is we have to really think about it from the standpoint of who's being hit the hardest by all of this. So
Sure.
we're discussing it and trying to figure out what will work best, but there's no chance,
Yeah,
at
okay.
this point.
Just thought I'd ask.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was, the scope of this project was large to accomplish over one summer,
Oh, it is.
yeah. So, thank you. And,
Yeah.
and Ken, I think, thank you also for recognizing that you needed an assistant and bringing that forward. And I'm glad that that's helping.
Yes, I recognized it very soon.
Well, thank you for bringing it forward.
Year to get,
And they, yeah.
The 18
Well,
and
thanks for-
20-hour
for
days
proving
weren't just a little hint.
Yeah,
I
well,
think-
you know, it's a
yeah.
lot of change, like Sheila said, everything is,
Right.
you know, everything last year, now we go into with this 7.6 million, there's a lot of new stuff now that we're gonna have to have a learning curve on, so we start all over again this year in most cases.
Someday we're gonna stop
Great.
saying that.
That's a wonderful,
I-
wonderful update.
Yes, thank you. I have
Oh,
two questions.
All right,
Well, just one last thing, we're gonna do press release or get the paper to come do a story.
Oh, yeah, I love that question.
Coming on the 22nd,
Yeah.
actually.
excellent.
Nice.
We've also thought about having a video made to finish this, like we had,
Yeah.
you know,
Nice.
the great video that helped us sell the bond.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
so
yeah.
I reached out today, and Sheila knows about this. We talked about this in our facilities meeting a little bit, but
Oh, that'd be cool.
we have the same film crew that came,
Oh, will
and
they
they'd
do-
like to, kind of like a documentary type thing. They'd like to come.
Good.
They're gonna do some active, under construction pictures on Thursday, video, and then we're gonna follow it up with a second visit, and then maybe a third visit. They're looking at a cost of approximately, I think he said I think I have an estimate for around $5,300 to do this video. And EEI has said that they would pay for half of it. And so, and I went back to them and just said, well, if we do better, depending on how our budget turns out, would you do it all? And so we're still working on that, but nonetheless, it looks like we'd probably be looking at a $2,650 cost to give the public a nice video, which I do think is gonna be huge, to see the before and after. Solar panels working, boilers, lights, LED lights throughout the air handler in here. It'd be a lot cooler in here.
Yeah.
Cool.
Something that I'd like to point out in a report that Ken received and shared with the Facilities Committee from the roofing manufacturer, and the way this is all happening now and what they're doing with the roofs, he's talking in his report about, instead of having 20 years and have to replace a roof, we'll go 20, 25 years and do some remediation and get another 10 years and then do a rebuild and maybe get 15 beyond that. So we aren't gonna be replacing roofs every 15 or 20 years. There's some cost to doing that, but there's a monstrous saving in not having to keep going back there in an emergency and replace a roof.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this whole project was really well-planned and thought out, and yeah, we had a lot of, whoever did this had a lot of foresight.
Yeah.
It's good, very well executed.
And we'll add to that roofing plan for long-term capital planning. We're gonna really get in deep on that in the upcoming facilities meetings. So above and beyond this bond, we're gonna know every roof and how long it has left and what we have to look forward to as far as cost goes.
Awesome,
With this same company, we're gonna keep them around.
great, thank you. We are behind time, but
Okay,
can
I
be
just
quick.
wanted to know how EEI was doing. How they've been to work with?
Oh, they're
Sounds
excellent.
like they're great.
They're second to none. They're very, very good.
That's super. And we don't have a contractual issue with, with the teachers about not getting in on time. Is there a contractual issue with the teachers not getting into the rooms on time?
It is on time per contract.
That's what I'm
Just that
asking.
Many teachers, probably most teachers like to be in
Earlier. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that was
for understandable reasons, but.
Of course, I feel terrible. It's gonna be a rough start.
When the bad dreams start.
All right, excellent, thank you very much, Ken.
You're welcome.
All right, that brings us to our discussion items. So, community boards update. Did everyone get a chance to read the Front Porch Forum example?
Yes.
This is something that came up with when Sheila and I met, talking about ways to just keep the community informed of what we're doing. And I touched base with Christina about it, thinking that perhaps board clerk, board chair, we could collaborate to accomplish this, unless, unless there's folks that want to make a communications committee. We're kind of committeed out. But this is just a discussion around whether this might be something that our board is interested in doing. So essentially, this is posting to Front Porch Forum after each board meeting, just a quick factual synopsis of this is what happened at our meeting tonight or yesterday, whenever. Did you want to say anything more about it?
And what's coming up the next time. That's basically it. But there were a myriad of reasons why they elected to do this. And it's been, I think, pretty successful for them. And I think the reason it came up here for me was actually in and around this bond, just thinking about updates to the community about all of the hard work and, some questions people might have, but then it kind of led us down a path of deeper discussion. Well, who would really be the most appropriate person to be updating on the bond? Is it really me, or is it the board? And anyway, this is where we ended up after some discussion, just sort of talking about this idea of just board summaries in general, and just another way to engage with the community. So, I think.
So
oops, sorry, one more thing.
I'm just curious to know how different this is than the minutes that are taken from the meeting, or
So
is
the
it?
difference is that this is pushing out communication, the synopsis, and if you're looking for the minutes, you're basically having to do that yourself. You're going to the website,
Right.
you're seeking, so that's really the only difference, is pushing out versus the individual having to take the initiative to find that information on their own, which they may intend to do and then have trouble following,
Right.
right? So this is
Right.
a quick way to say, oh, they talked about that at the meeting, and then they can always go back to the meeting minutes to look in more detail at what's happening. I think too, you could, it's just for discussion, really.
Right.
But I think dovetailing it with other efforts, community engagement committee might have, around the budget or other community events and those types of things. Like, it just gets people accustomed to hearing from you, the board, with an update.
So would it be possible for Christina to take Glory's minutes and massage them and make them more user-friendly or something like that? I
think this is
thinking about-
actually quicker than the minutes. This would be right after either the night or the next day after the
The
meeting.
next day.
That's a lot of work.
And-
Yeah,
and
that's a lot of work.
Christina,
I mean,
If
we
Glory's
haven't
already
really
got-
talked about
if
who's
she's already-
writing and how it gets written, like.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, but, yeah.
If there was something to work from, so if
Yeah.
Glory's minutes could go, let's just say Christina was the one to do it, or the community engagement committee took it on, taking her minutes and just putting it in this kind of a format, which is kind of more friendly.
But the minutes don't get completed and published for a period of time beyond the point where you'd want this communication to go out.
But Glory actually sends them out pretty quickly to us for comments before she's been doing that.
They have to be out within 5 days of the board
Yeah.
meeting.
Yeah, but
Sheila,
you-
how did your other district do it?
I think they worked more off the agenda than they did necessarily the
Off the
minutes.
agenda. Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
That makes sense.
Really
Okay.
just kind of going through the list of things that were on the agenda, and then how the board, acted. We elected to approve the contracts for the nurse, the 3 things. So it's just a synopsis, and it may or may not be a fit. Like I said, there were a number of reasons why this came up in my other district. And you might not be in the same place, and this may not be a fit for you. It was just really
I
for
think it's a
discussion.
great idea.
And,
Did you
and one
notice-
follow-up, from this board chair also was that if there was feedback that came to Front Porch Forum, that they actually would bring that feedback to the next meeting and address it in the public forum at the next meeting.
Or not, depending.
Or
I mean,
not,
they didn't
if it
necessarily,
wasn't.
but if they got a lot of feedback on something, they might either develop, say like a frequently asked questions, as a board, you know, because, you know, if they knew that a number of, folks were having the same questions about different things, you know, they might, publish something, that would go out as additional correspondence, or they might just accept, you know, that comment as you would anybody passing you in the grocery store, just saying, I didn't like that you approved the bond for $7 million, and thank you very much. You wouldn't necessarily bring that back at the next
Right.
board meeting.
Did you notice more public participation by doing Front Porch Forum there?
It might have changed, I would say, the tone of the, and it may not have as well. So, they were really struggling post-act, post-merger to, present as a united front, and this was an effort to help achieve that. So, like I said, you don't necessarily have that issue, so.
Well,
Yeah,
It's
Yeah.
always good to be
yeah,
talking about what we're doing, I think.
Oh my
yeah,
gosh,
but
yes.
I don't think we have that issue. I think we're a cohesive group, aren't we?
But I think we are a cohesive group, but I think as we've discussed, maybe even in your interview, how the board has gotten more cohesive, but I don't think the communities are necessarily there yet. So I think this is a great, and we're trying to look for ways to be more responsive too, which is not easy in a formal board meeting.
Right.
So,
So how about I propose this? I could take a stab at writing a summary like this about today's meeting, review it with Christina, bring it to the next meeting next week, and we could have it as an action item to vote on whether we want to do this or not.
Sounds good.
Does that make sense?
So
We
you're,
have a look.
you're proposing
wouldn't
that what you would
publish
bring
it.
forward is more like a model for
Right.
what it might look like for you
Right.
to do that.
Does that make sense?
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Because there is a fair amount of our board that's not here too.
Right.
You know,
That's
so
kind of
maybe it is
thinking.
good to,
Get
Right.
some more opinions on the matter too. And also, we can see how long it takes.
yeah,
And if
take
it's too,
turns or something like,
if
yeah,
it's-
yeah,
seems like a little more work than,
yeah.
It's just a sentence or two,
Right.
really,
Yeah.
about each thing.
Yeah, I mean, basically,
You could even make
it's like
notes
an
in
agenda
there.
summary, right, yeah.
exactly. Okay.
Yeah, but this is a short agenda.
True.
Now, some of the
True.
agendas that we have,
That's true.
you'd
That is
go on
true.
for 20 pages.
Not on
The
Front Porch
agenda
Forum,
itself?
though.
Right.
Hopefully not.
We just accepted it, or we denied it.
Okay.
If you were trying to summarize all of the discussion, say, for example, is that what you mean?
Yeah, there's
I
really
think
no.
it's safe to say we discussed
Yeah.
this and not kind of get into the details.
Right.
Yeah.
But it might encourage someone to watch the meeting, you know, like
Or come
actually
to the
watch
next
it.
board meeting.
Okay, I'll put that on my homework list here.
Thanks for doing all the homework, Sue.
It's my job.
And you do it very well.
Okay, so anything else about that for tonight? We'll put it on action item, and we can either vote it up or vote it down. Okay, board professional development requests. Did you want
So
to speak
this
to
was
that?
clarification from me because a request came forward from a board member asking about attending some professional development and wondering if there was money in the budget for the workshop. And I learned that there is $3,000 in the budget for professional development for the board. I'm thinking that's to pay for, say, like help pay for the facilitator to come for the retreat in September. That's, I wouldn't know where else we were paying for that if not for the board education piece. So I guess I'm just wondering in general, how are those requests typically brought forward, and or what is past practice with this?
If one of the board members wants to sign up for one of the seminars or something, we send a request to Glory and she puts it in.
The
It's-
VSBA seminars.
Yeah,
This was outside of VSBA, this
well,
was something different.
and then we go to,
The annual conference at Lake Maury, which,
yeah,
This is not sponsored, I don't believe, by VSBA. They're not the traditional thing. So it's just a workshop that I think was
so
of
in the
interest to the
past,
person.
I went to a conference, the NES, I can't remember the name of it, down in Hartford. Yes.
Thank you.
And Joanne invited me to go because it was all about community engagement, and then she asked me again this year if I wanted to go, and I wasn't able to, and so that
We don't know
that
where
would've
that
been
money
different.
came from, right? We don't know if that money
I don't
came
know
out of
where that money came from, that's what I'm saying.
My guess is that came out of the school's professional development money for that conference, because they'll give you a composite. They want you to bring a community member, a student, a board member, you know, so you're registering your team. You're not paying for those folks, you know, differently out of different pots of money, so,
Personally, I've only gone to board professional development that was recommended by the superintendent, I guess. Maybe I don't take enough initiative, but that's my personal story.
Yeah.
I guess I'm just questioning how you would want to prioritize the use of those funds. Whether it's, you know, making sure that we have attendance at the VSBA conferences and so forth, and or money to pay our facilitator for the retreat before authorizing those additional expenses, or is it first come, first serve? I just need some direction.
We've never been asked this question. I don't
Yeah,
think.
well,
We don't
We're all
really know.
confused now.
I know, so, sorry.
I mean,
What I
obviously,
wouldn't,
never had
what I
this
wouldn't
request either.
necessarily want to do is be in a position where I'm trying to, you know, evaluate the choice, or,
Right.
I'd rather not be in that place.
I think that what happened in the past, and I don't know as we ever got to the limit of our budget, but in any of the expenses, that you do what you do, and when you get down near the bottom and you say, darn, there isn't money enough here to do that, but this budget over here's got some, we can transfer some money and make it all work. As long as the overall stays within the parameters.
Is there a way for you to tell us how it's been spent previously, like last year, or?
There's never been a request like this before. It's always been like a VSBA sponsored
Yeah.
type of thing. And it's, do we usually use all the money? Do you have a sense
Well,
of
what
that?
have you been spending the money on?
the
Like the VSBA stuff.
facilitators.
Like,
Just the
Yeah.
VSBA stuff, yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we already have committed to a facilitator, obviously. We can, probably guesstimate from the past what the expenses would be for folks to go to the VSBA and the annual conference.
why don't I draft up a little
Yeah.
budget of what I think it might look like, and just see
Right.
where we're at. And
Yeah,
I need more direction, but I just needed to know sort of what the past practice was, so that's helpful.
Did you get
Guess
your
it's up to your-
answer?
I know.
Up to your discretion.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like we have these expenditures that are common. What's that gonna cost?
Right.
What's left over? Then maybe we could give you a better idea of.
Right, if there's anything left over, then maybe there's a decision to be made, I guess.
Okay,
Because did you say it was $3,000 total?
total,
Sounds like there might not be a lot left over.
right.
But, all right. So you'll let us know if you need more.
Yes, I will.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so the 2019 work plan, Sheila and I are meeting in the morning to plan for next week and to go through the work plan and hopefully finalize where some of the presentations when they will take place. But there were a couple meeting dates on there that I wanted to run past the board for a decision. And one is, these are the third Monday meetings. One is 11/19, which is the Monday of Thanksgiving week, and I believe the school has the whole week off this year. And the other is January 21st, which is Martin Luther King Day, another school vacation. So we could potentially move those both to the fourth Mondays for those months. But I don't know what other people's calendars or preferences are.
It would seem that the Monday before Thanksgiving would be less onerous than the Monday after, because people might not be back yet.
Well, but there's school then, so if anyone's coordinated with the school schedule, teachers and administrators and parents.
I would be okay with moving them, but I also recommend that we cancel them.
So these are 2 of the 7 third Monday meetings that the board approved for this year.
I'm recommending that we cancel them, if we can.
The November one, it's the budget season.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I think we
Yeah.
need
We
that.
probably would.
We need that one. Yeah.
January.
Yep.
We could,
Extra
we
budget
could also
meetings.
potentially move them to other months, I guess. But January, yeah, they're kind of
Already
both
have budget
budgeting
meetings too
season.
that you have.
All right, so John wants to cancel them. I want to move them to the fourth Mondays. What do you guys want?
I'm okay
I would
moving them too.
prefer to move them to the fourth Mondays.
Me too.
You're probably gonna have to have one on each of those dates before we get all done, considering that it is budget season.
Well, right. We may have to add additional meetings in January in particular, anyway.
Yeah, I'm
Well,
not
so you
sure
need
why
a-
we'll need an extra meeting in November, to be perfectly honest. I mean, I know we'll need one in we'll probably need 2 in January. So let's cancel the November one, get on with the other work that we have to do. And we know we're gonna have to meet like 3 times in January, or more. Plus
Well, we
the
don't know
budget
yet, 'cause the
presentation
budget
meeting,
calendar
plus a couple of
hasn't
other
been
things.
made up. The annual meeting will be in
John, we know
February.
that you voted against the extra meetings anyway.
You're hanging in there, sticking right
Now
to
it
it.
comes out.
Okay, do you need a motion to do this? Or you just are you just looking for a,
It's a discussion item. I don't think we need a motion. I think we just need a consensus of,
There'll just be a notice come out that you got a meeting. I know how this works.
I'm for your recommendation, Sue.
yeah, George?
Like I said, you're gonna send out a notice. Then there'll be a meeting.
Come to my meeting, George.
That's what you said to me today.
Well, look at this turnout now. Okay.
I would say the
Okay.
fourth.
All right, we'll move them both to the fourth Monday, and we won't expect John at the November.
I just don't want there to
So
be-
is there a conflict with December 23rd? Do we have a meeting that day too?
Oh, I hope not.
Well, I would
I
hope
That's
not.
this-
I think we only put 1 meeting in
One
December.
in December, we
See,
did.
there
Okay,
were the
great.
7, so it's just December 10th.
Great, okay.
That's why there's 2 in November. And
You
2
mean
in
December,
You sent
Ninth.
out an annual meeting list.
okay.
Okay,
When did you
Great.
send that?
all right. I believe that brings us
All
to
of
the
your
end of
board meetings
our
for the year?
open session.
So I'll move that we
Can you send
go
it
into
to me,
executive session for the purpose of discussing a personnel matter following the law written here, VSA 313, and we would like to invite the superintendent.
I second that.
All right. All in favor of entering into executive session, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
And we will return.
We will return to open session before we adjourn.
Where are we going?
I don't know.
Okay.
Probably the library. That's
What's
where
that?
we use-